The Unlikely Innovators with Mike Commito and Steve Gravel. Presented by Cambrian R&D and the Center for Smart Mining.
All right. Well, welcome. Thanks for being here. This is our third annual live-ish podcast at Cambrian College as part of Research and Innovation Week. And it's clear that we should have had more accountants on throughout the last 4 seasons because I think this is the most people we've had in the room, and I think it's the Ed Reilly factor.
Absolutely.
You're too kind, Mike. You're too kind.
So we're so excited to have Ed Reilly join us today. He's managing partner and co-founder of Freelandt, Caldwell, Reilly. As the managing partner and co-founder of Freelandt, Caldwell, Reilly, Ed is a dynamic leader who exemplifies what it means to lead by example. With over 35 years of experience in public accounting, he has built a reputation as a trusted advisor to entrepreneurial business owners, specializing in helping small and mid-market enterprises navigate complex financial landscapes. An entrepreneur at heart, Ed combines deep expertise in accounting, assurance, tax, and business succession planning with a forward-thinking approach to transaction advisory. And now he is a guest on the Unlikely Innovators.
That's great.
My mother wrote that.
I was going to say,
Yeah.
that looks like your handwriting.
It's always awkward reading someone's bio in front of them, but we had to do it just in case anyone's not familiar with you and the great work you do here in our community. So we always start the pod asking our guests about their journey, right? It's Unlikely Innovators. So sometimes the journeys are a little bit more circuitous or maybe not as you planned. Did you always plan to get into accounting and business? Was that in the cards for you, or what were you thinking about when you were thinking about what your career might look like?
Yeah, actually, when I first started, funny and true story. When I was at university, I met my current wife, and I really didn't know what I wanted to do. You're a young student in third, fourth year. What am I going to do for the next 40 years? And I met her father, who was a chartered accountant. So in my third year, I said, well, if I'm going to marry this girl, I better get serious about my career. And that's really when, and he had 2 brothers that were also CAs. So that was sort of the start of my my introduction into the accounting world. And then I moved up to Sudbury in 1984. So that was the beginning of sort of the being in the finance area. And I thought way back when that I wanted to get my credentials and then move right into go buy a business, become a car dealer, be an entrepreneur. And then, and I don't know if I'm going too far ahead here, but then I ended up staying in the practice for some 35, 40 years.
Yeah, and I think early on, you, of course, as many accountants, get started at firms.
Yeah.
And you and your founders of FCR sort of started together.
Yeah.
And then you left and then started your own practice, which is, I'm sure, daunting.
Yeah.
Tell us a bit about that transition, and what were did you have any doubts along the way? As I can imagine you did, but did you have some doubts as you were rolling that new business out?
Well, it was funny, and I've got a real close connection to Cambrian, and for many reasons. But two, our Bernie Freeland was one of the founding partners, and his now deceased wife, Betty Freeland, was a vice president. And I see Lana Caldwell Benoit in the crowd today, and her dad, George Caldwell, was another founding partner. So the F is Bernie Freeland, the C is George Caldwell, and myself, Ed Reilly. But it was funny because I was with a national firm, and going through partner interviews. Bernie was a partner. George was a senior in the senior leadership group, and Bernie tapped me and George tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, we're leaving. You want to come?" and I said, "Sure." So I went home and told my wife Jane, who we had 2 young children. They were just infants at the time, third one on the way. And I said, "Oh, Jane, by the way, I'm going with Bernie and George." And she said, "Are you nuts?" So that was kind of it became very real for me real quick, because I had a lot of obligations, obviously, with children and more on the way. But when I left, and I was blessed with great partners that I had no business being an equal partner with those 2 guys. But they saw something in me and saw something in the marketplace that there was an opportunity. The firm went through some mergers that we were at and took on more of a sort of a large corporate culture. that we really didn't buy into, and thought that, you know, the entrepreneurial marketplace for Northern Ontario was really where we wanted to spend our time and efforts, and that was sort of the impetus of the firm, and that was in 1991. So we started with 6, and we're probably stretching. I think we included Lana and her younger brother as employees at the time. But we were 6 people, and today we're over 150 professionals. Wow. So it's had significant growth, but it's been an absolute joy, and like I say, blessed with great partners to start.
So it's a bit of a Jerry Maguire moment, like, who's coming with me?
Yeah,
and,
a little bit of that. A little bit of that. We're walking on. I remember walking down the stairs with boxes, talking about innovation and digital. Like, it wasn't digital back in those days. You're walking out with hard copy files. So, so it was a bit of a Jerry Maguire moment for sure.
And then when you guys are getting started, obviously, you know, at that point, like, you don't have the national brand behind you anymore. So you've got to do things that are a little bit more creative and innovative to get yourself off the ground and really get into the marketplace. What were some of the things that you guys did initially, and then maybe even a little bit over time, to differentiate and show that you were on the same playing field?
Yeah, it's a different game not having a national brand. We were actually speaking earlier on today about, like, what do you do for a lot of the technical backup that you need, and whether it's HR issues, tax issues. So what we did when we were growing the firm was to actually, you know, do that ourselves. So we built a lot of these systems and innovations within the fabric of the firm. And you got to try harder. I mean, one of the things about being out there on your own, there's no do-overs. Like, you got to make it count every day you go to work. And we tried to instill that culture within the firm so that everybody's coming to work every day trying to value add to our clients, because at the end of the day, we're trying to emulate what they need, right? So entrepreneurs, and I think we've got some in the crowd today, as an entrepreneur, there's a lot of things that you got to do on your own that you can't rely on big brother or big sister for. And so innovation was a huge part of the evolution of the firm. Like I say, when I first started, we literally were hand bombing trial balances. So you'd have 21 column paper. You start out with a trial balance. You're doing journal entries, like, with pencils, and that's not a line. You're drafting financial statements on your own. So the evolution of the industry has been exponential over the years that we were in practice. So you got to try harder. We always fought above our weight class. We're basically take no prisoners attitude to the marketplace, and like I say, we instilled that in all the leadership people that we've got working for us. So it's worked so far.
So when companies are first starting out, just to go back to this, there's usually a moment where you're like, okay, we're going to be okay. There's an aha moment where you're like, I think we've really found something here. Can you actually crystallize that to a particular client or a size that you grew to, where you said, all right, you know, this is going to be what I'm going to do for the next 30 years?
Yeah, that's crystal clear in my mind. Anyways, early on, we were really gaining some momentum. So, you know, we started out in a facility where it was 2,500 square feet, and next thing you know, we had 2 and 3 staff jammed into an office. You know, we were crowded in there like mice. So we were growing very rapidly. We gained some traction because we picked up some nice large accounts that gave us the opportunity to work on some really innovative and creative clients. And lo and behold, I lost one, right? It was probably the largest client in the office. I spent a ton of my time on this client. And so, you know, you go home and you're in a bit of a panic mode. You dust yourself off and say, okay, we got to get back to work here. And lo and behold, that time slot that we would have been doing that work, we had a 20% increase in business. And that was the aha moment that, you know, resiliency, stick-to-itiveness, I think is a Disney term, that you got to, and I almost thought, what would I tell my client if they lost a major account or something catastrophic happened? It wasn't catastrophic, but something very significant happened in your business. How do you react to that? So I said, this is the advice that I would give them. So I took a little bit of the advice that I think I would have given them, and we just dug deep. We came out swinging, And at the end of the day, we grew by 20% during that time frame and actually never looked back. So it was at that moment that I kind of gained some confidence. And like I say, the partners that I had were very, very encouraging and supportive. So that's very important too, that you need people around you that you can count on, so that if you have those moments that you can sort of dig out from the ashes. And we did, never look back.
The rest is history.
Yeah, yeah.
We talked about your headcount and how it had grown. One of the things I wanted to ask you, because again, everybody in the audience might not be aware of this, but I think it's been a few months now, but you hired Alex, who has a PhD in
Yes.
physics, which is typically like an unconventional background to have working in an accounting firm. And it makes me kind of think about Moneyball, is one of my
Yeah.
favorite movies where they were doing things a little bit differently. But maybe that kind of ties back to the culture of innovation. And like Alex is one example, but what are some of the other things you've done outside of the processes you've had to innovate, but things you've done differently, where you've thought unconventionally and brought people in that has, you know, helped the firm grow and be what it is today?
Yeah, it's like I say, when you have to do it by yourself, you got to be innovative by default. Otherwise, you're gonna crash and burn. So, you know, Alex is a really good point of context, because, you know, you find a smart person and who's kind and gentle and can work as a team player. It's just a no-brainer to bring them on. So he's actually working in our SHRED group, grants, incentives, and scientific research and experimental development. I think he's actually worked with you guys on some joint projects. So when you bring that talent pool to the party, you've got a different offering for your clients. And, you know, further to that, we've got 7 full-time technical people in our IT group. We call it our DNA group, that basically are data scientists. So, you know, you might think like they're not accountants, they're not even finance people. They're computer programmers that are creating bots, they're utilizing artificial intelligence. So we've got them full-time working on opportunities and forward-thinking, you know, brain trusts as to how we can better deliver our product. Because there's a lot of things that we do that are dull and mundane, like you're reconciling bank accounts and matching invoices to support documents. Sounds exciting, but it can drive you crazy at times. So, you know, people don't want to do it. People don't want to pay for it. So what's the alternative? You got to find a way to do it mechanically or digitally, and that group is actually doing that. A lot of the systems that we've got now are streamlined, you know, sending things out for signatures. So bots take that approach. So it eliminates, like I say, the dull and mundane that people just don't want to work on. So that whole innovation piece has been a massive part of the success of our business to. You know, and what it also does, it attracts a different mindset. So, you know, you got a data scientist or a PhD in physics with somebody who's got an MBA in corporate finance and a tax person. So you put them all together, what you find out, you come out with great solutions to potential real life problems that our clients are faced with. So it's been an exciting part of the business. You might say, you know, like I might be one of the older guys in the group, but it really keeps me on my game, because you're continually challenged with new and innovative things that you've got to bring to the industry.
Well, and I think you'd agree that you wouldn't be able to take the risk of adding these new services if you weren't nimble and the size that you've been, right?
Yeah, it sounds a little cliche, but you do got to be agile.
Yeah.
When you look at Northern Ontario, like I've lived through hyperinflation, 14% prime rate, strikes, $2 nickel, $22 nickel, $3,000 gold, $1,500 gold, wars. So you're faced with these challenges in Northern Ontario because we're a commodity-based environment, right? So you've got to be leading edge in a lot of the thought process and agile to react to those particular needs, both internally as a firm, but if we're agile and nimble internally, you know, you in turn can then sort of deliver that message and advise your clients accordingly, because they're faced with the same kind of things that we are,
Yeah.
maybe just in a little different environment.
Yeah, and it's, I think, that commiserating you could do that makes it a compelling
Yeah.
offering that you guys have. I want to go back to talent for a second, and the fact that you've, you know, hired physics
Yeah.
PhDs. So you have a bit of flexibility on what you could do because you're a smaller company or a medium-sized company. What is it that you look for in your new hires? Because there is a resume that you look at,
Yeah.
but I'm sure there's much more to that once you meet the person, and there's some folks graduating soon in the audience. What is it that you look for when you're screening those resumes?
The number one thing, and it sounds a little corny, but is if you're a nice person.
Right.
I mean, and that is number one in our books. And you pass that test, then obviously we look for people that are, you know, are self-starters. They want to be part of that innovation, you know, creative, innovative world. Because the profession is not stayed anymore. You know, the old bean counters with the visors, and you go in your little box there, and you.
I think Lana still wears hers.
Sorry. But
Only on formal occasions. Yeah.
but we're looking for people who want to be part of that dynamic group, and be part of a team that is like-minded and supportive. You know, and the reality is we want to get people excited. We joke a little bit about, you know, is the accounting profession exciting? Well, like I say, I truly believe it is. I've been in it for a long time, and the only reason I stayed is because you come to work every day, and you're going to be faced with different challenges. Like, it's not like you got your work lined up, but what you plan to do the night before the next day is nowhere close to what actually happens during the day. So we're looking for people that can pivot, be reactionary, you know, are brave, because, to be honest with you, we're looking for champions too. And as you know, you want to champion a project. It can be a very, very lonely world from the point of view that every project doesn't go necessarily the way you planned it. So you want people that aren't afraid to take a challenge on and fail, and never quit. You know, we don't accept quitters, and even in over the course of the evolution of the firm, we've had people that have sort of, you know, got a little bit negative and you know, almost tap out and admit defeat, and we say, no, not yet, not like that commercial goes, not today, not today. So we drag them back in, get them jacked up, and and some of our best leaders and highest performers are people that at a point in time maybe wanted to tap out, and we just wouldn't let them.
It's like Navy SEAL training. They can't ring that bell.
There's like we say it, maybe it's a little off color, but we're street fighters.
Yeah.
And we just don't say, we always try to get to a yes.
Yeah.
So if a client has a challenge, or we've got an idea within the firm that you want to bring forward, we don't want to say no, so we find a way to get to yes. So we're looking for people like that, that see it the way we do, and drink the Kool-Aid, as you might say. But we're actually out in the early days. We're out talking to the high school students.
Right.
And we've done some joint visits with your folks about recruiting people, you know, in grade 11 and 12. We've got grade 11 and 12 people working for us during the summers.
Right.
So we get them early, you know, and you sort of look at sort of the people that are going to fit the profile of the individuals that we want working for us, and that will obviously be accepted by our clients.
Well, it seems to be working.
Yeah.
And while I was going to ask you this, but I think you kind of already clarified it a little bit, but like early on, you guys had that scrappy mentality, and I think you mentioned street fighters. Like, as the company's grown and as you get bigger, there's always the risk that you become, you know, too corporate.
Yeah.
But it's obviously been important for you to keep that street fighter, that scrappy mentality as you've grown.
Yeah.
Has that been important? And I guess what are some of the things you've done to try to encourage that, other than, like, you know, jacking people up and getting them pumped up? But is there anything you guys have done deliberately to try to ensure that you keep that original personality that the company started with?
Yeah, we have a whole process within the firm where you've got a designated mentor. So you come in the front door, somebody's got your back, right? And it's not even technical training, because we've got that whole process nailed, right? I mean, we got managers, we got full-time trainers that deal with the technical part of the business, but this is almost like your career trajectory, where somebody's keeping an eye on you. And so, like, over time, you need that go-to person that you can confide in, and it's not necessarily going to affect your career, right? This is a person-on-person mentorship role that you can confide in to sort of help with that, the whole, because it's a bumpy, and we're in a tough business. Like, I mean, you think about it, at the end of the day, our masters are our clients. And they need their stuff done, and they need answers, and they need guidance, and so it can be a pretty tough business. So what we try to do is, at the more senior levels, insulate the more junior people from that sort of scrappy, tough mentality, where guys are bashing steel and bending stuff and welding, and so that like I say, it can be very tough, or you're scrapping with Revenue Canada or the banks. So there's a time and place when you're going to step into that role, but it might not be at the early stages of your career.
I just want to pick up on something you just said there, because it's interesting to me. Because a lot of the time when you meet with a client, there's a clock on that discussion, because they're going after a business opportunity. Maybe they need capitalization to go after a particular opportunity. You have to be as fast, if not faster, at mobilizing than that company does, right, to go after that opportunity.
There's no question, because in a lot of cases, what ends up happening, like in the true spirit of an entrepreneur, they make the call, right? So they're moving forward, and then everybody's got to catch up.
How do we make the accounting work in the background?
Exactly. Or I bought a CNC and I need $500,000, and oh, by the way, it's being delivered next week. So we're on the phone.
We know all about that.
Exactly. So you're on the phone with the bank. Do you lease it? Do you buy it? Do you fund it out of cash flow? So agility and staying ahead of your clients is a major reason for, I think, the success of our business, and we try to instill that in all our staff. Like, you can't just send out an email and wait for an answer. You might send out an email, but then you're on it. You got to follow up. You've got to be on the client or on the CFO to get you the information you require to allow you to get the financer and the capitalization that or even when you're doing grant applications and shred claims and stuff. You've got to do things long in advance to make sure that you qualify. So you can't be coming to the party late, because too little, too late. Yeah. You typically lose a client that way, too.
Yeah. Leave a lot of money on the table.
Yeah, and leave a lot of money on the table.
Yeah. So in the audience, we actually have some students that, I said before, graduating, but we also have some that are participating in the Student Innovation Challenge tomorrow night, which is our annual pitch competition. And I wanted to know if, for those students, excuse me, as well as just the graduating students, do you have any advice for starting a business, maybe in Northern Ontario or in tech, or just any advice that you see from the sort of the number of companies that you've worked with over the years?
Yeah, and I know it's a pitch for the profession, I guess, in some respects, but real-time financial reporting is paramount. The banks now are demanding it. Back in the day, we used to be, called scorekeepers, right? So we're after the fact quarterbacks. Nowadays, the banks want real-time reporting. They're interested in sort of what's going to happen in the next 3 to 6 months. What are your working capital requirements? So if you're delivering a financial statement 6 months after the year end, some of those transactions happened 18 months ago, which is really not relevant to what's going on today. So no question, when you start a business, you've got to have those things in place so that you're informed. And it's just one more tool that you've got, because in the early stages of a business, there's a lot of potential for failure, right? So financial reporting is paramount, and in understanding that, finding good advisors, whether it's a good banker, a good lawyer, a good accountant, your C-suite has got to be strong. It's maybe easy to say now, but the C-suite, whether it's in your HR group, your finance group, your sales and marketing group, you need a strong leadership team to sort of assist as best you can with the success of the business, to give you guidance as, because you're always going to get a curveball, guaranteed it's coming. You just don't know what inning it's going to be.
Yeah, I mean, you'd rather the business idea fail on its merits rather than bad financial management, right?
Yeah, 100%.
That'd be the ultimate travesty, that you see a really good business idea fail because of the concrete you need in the ground, right?
Yeah. The other thing is, when you're starting a business, I mean, the tendency is you have a little bit of early success, right? So the thing is, let's go lease an expensive car, or I wanted to drive a Denali, or you know what I mean? So when we counsel with young entrepreneurs, and if they're successful and they're making decent money, preserving your capital early on in your business has massive benefits long term. It's a little bit of pain personally in the early years, but you save your capital, you use your own money to expand the business, and then the banks will love you. If you're playing catch up from a capitalization perspective in the early days, it's the old story, and Bernie and George always said when we first started, if there's cash in the bank, we take it. If there's no cash, you put it in. So it's a real simple way to run your business, but it's really, sound advice, because if you're spending somebody else's money to run your lifestyle, it's a formula for disaster.
Right. Yeah, I saw some notes taking, so it's good.
One thing we did want to ask you just before we kind of get to the end of the interview is, you guys have had a chance to work with a lot of different clients and companies across Northern Ontario. And aside from, I think, having, the core, fundamentals in place of, sound financial management, are there any other characteristics you see in Northern Ontario companies that have allowed them to be successful?
Yeah, resiliency is number one. And I think you just can't quit. I mean, so many times, and we've had recent firsthand knowledge of this, where your business is going to go through peaks and valleys. Like I said before, when nickel's $3 a pound, life's not, or there's a strike going on. You just got to be resilient. You got to keep coming to work, and you got to come back for more, because I don't know that I've ever seen a business failure as a result. There's always a business failure for one reason that's out of your control normally. But if you keep coming to work, and we actually tell the banks this, don't panic, because those entrepreneurs, they know how to do this stuff. They know because they're all in. These businesses they've got it all on the line. Their house, their family, all your investment, your retirement is on the line. So resiliency and seeking advice in tough times is very important too, because you get a different perspective, right? We're coming at things from a pure clinical. We're not emotionally attached to the business, although certain times we are, because you really have empathy for what's going on. But we give sage advice based on a clinical look at things, and if you seek that early on, you can avoid a lot of pain down the road. But keep coming to work. It generally solves itself. I don't think I've seen a situation where, if they kept coming to work, and literally, we've got 2 or 3 in recent history where we told the banks just stay calm, and sure enough, we monetized the business at significant numbers, where not too long ago they were in special loans at a bank.
Right.
And special isn't special the way
you don't want those loans.
Funny story, and I know we're trapped for time, but this one client was having some difficulties, and we're in the boardroom, and we've got the banker sitting there, and this guy in the suit sitting, and we moved you to special loans, and my client perked up and says, "Geez, I'm with somebody." I said, "Nah, That's not the place you want to be. But anyway, I kid about that.
Special loans.
Special loans.
I'll remember that.
Yeah.
So, Ed, we want to have a bit of fun as we close out. So we actually had a double agent help us with something.
Double agents.
Double
maybe.
agents, that's right. So we actually reached out to George and to Bernie if they had any stories of your beginnings or how you guys worked together. And they couldn't share about half the stories because we knew this is going to be.
Dad for me, Lana.
This is going to be. But we got some good intel from your co-founders. Is it true that early on in the business, when money's tight, as it is with most, you actually hemmed your pants with a stapler?
Oh, geez. True story. True story. And it's true. In the early years, you got kids, you got mortgages, you got car loans, and my mom actually bought me those suits. So my mother bought me my first 2 or 3 suits. Anyways, the hem's coming down, and I had to staple it with to keep it. Another quick story on and maybe you've got another one, but I was out on an audit. Literally up in Espanola, and you're a young person, right? I have one shirt, right? Spilt some ink on it, right? In the early days, so I took some white out and white outed the shirt. So
that's a good tip for you.
That's pretty good. Yeah. Shut up, Mike.
So we've all got these stories.
Yeah.
So the boys have been kind to me, so I appreciate that.
Well, we got one more on that too, and you're obviously a sharp-dressed man. We need you to class up the podcast today with Steve and I, but is it true also that back in the day, because you're not wearing that kind of suit right now, but did you wear green suits because green is the color of money?
True
is there
story.
any truth?
True story. I actually had a client. I had a client. The poor guy's passed away now, but he used to call me Green. That was my nickname for him, or that he had for me. He called me Green.
That's great.
It's going to be on the phone with Bernie and George right after this.
Yeah. But and like I say, I was really blessed with guys like that to start my career. And then Sam Lois, who's passed away now, was our tax partner that we made a partner shortly after starting the firm. But you really do got to rely on quality people, and they made me an equal partner when I had no business being an equal partner with those guys. So it was a great start, and you look for those people, and you can't help but be a success.
That's right. Well, Ed, thank you so much for sharing some of your time today. I know that it was really inspiring for me to hear the story, and we had a bit of fun on the way, and I'm sure everyone in the audience feels the same way too. So thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, it was great. Thanks.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks.
Yeah.
See you. Take care, man. Thank you.
The Unlikely Innovators with Mike Commito and Steve Gravel, presented by Cambrian R&D and the Center for Smart Mining.